So everything uttered here is for attribution. And just a little bit of context of where we are. This commission occurs every 10 years by District of Columbia law, and we are supposed to advise the mayor and the council about any and all changes to the tax and revenue structure of the city for the next 10 years. We're kind of winding up our work. And one of the things that we stumbled upon as of interest to us is what we're calling a business activity tax. And we understand that the great state of New Hampshire has been doing that for almost 30 years. And we thought, why not learn from people that have been there before us, and wanted to talk to you all about what lessons and observations you have. We have spoken to one panel consisting of business leaders from the state. And a couple of weeks ago, we also met with people from the tax administration department. But we're rounding it out now with talking to the legislators. Before I ask you to introduce yourself, I'll just say, as you might imagine, everybody loves change, right? So the whole advent of the possibility of a business activity tax here was upsetting to a few people at least. And so we decided to take the extra time and look at it more closely and learn some lessons from you all. So if you would, please, Senator and Representative, just introduce yourselves, and then we'll start off with some questions.
Great. I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I represent the District 20. I've been in the Senate for 26 years. I've chaired Ways and Means 3 times. I've chaired Finance 3 times. Been involved in the budget process for a long period of time. Prior to that, I served on the Executive Council, and prior to that, I served in the House.
Any connection to the mayor of Baltimore's family?
Well, I hope so. The D'Alessandros are all connected.
Yeah, I mean, because Nancy Pelosi, that's her dad, was mayor of Boston.
Right. Nancy
Yeah.
Pelosi is a D'Alessandro.
Yep.
Interesting.
And a great lady, in my opinion.
So I'm Susan Elmy. I am now the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. I joined the legislature 8 years ago now, and which is not as long as Lou D'Alessandro. And I went on the Finance Committee, which is our appropriations committee. My second term, they didn't allow you on the first term. And the third term, I and a Republican colleague, I'm a Democrat, were seconded off to restart the Ways and Means Committee because it was too much work to have both of them in the same committee. And I've been there ever since. And Democrats did not ever run the state from the Civil War until 2007. And I became chair in 2007, just in time to do a Democratic budget for the first time in 150 years, and then face the Great Recession, which did a number on us. For it took us 8 years, I think it was, to get fully out of that Great Recession. New Hampshire does not recover as quickly as other states, and that was a pretty big blow. But when I'm not chair, I'm ranking member these days.
Great.
So
Thank you very much. So I'll just start off with a little bit of context and then go right into questions. You may not know this, but here in the District of Columbia, we have a unique tax structure insofar as by congressional limitation, we are not able to tax any income of non-residents. So we have a situation where close to 40% of the income earned in the district is not taxable, and probably about half the land in the city is not taxable. So perhaps during the course of our dialogue, you all might imagine what that would be like if you had to manage that way in New Hampshire. But let's start off with a little bit of context from your end. Would you say that the business enterprise tax over the last 30 years has been successful? And if so, how would you define success?
Well, maybe
why don't you go first, Susan? Well, you've got somewhat more of it than I would, but I do not regarded as a success exactly, but it was put in place in order to appease a lawsuit that was filed against us by a man who later became governor for one term, that said that you are using a business profits tax, which only hits the larger, the more wealthy businesses. And this is against our Constitution, which it is. We can't form classes out of groups of people. And we, on just before, this was before I came in, but it just a little bit before I came in, the legislature avoided the lawsuit being won by putting in the business enterprise tax, which goes after everybody above a certain level of economic activity, which is pretty low, but and charges them tax. What you have to know about it is that the business profits tax is charged second, which means that the wealthy businesses do not pay the business enterprise tax. Legally, they pay the business enterprise tax and then they get it taken off from their business profits tax.
It's used.
So it's something a lot of people don't understand, and our statistics actually don't understand it very well. Trying to figure out what the business profits tax would bring us without the business enterprise tax there is at most an approximation. So it has a place in our very peculiar tax structure. And I would really like to know how you raise your taxes. But I would also like to say that we quite understand the predicament you told us, because most of our activity, our tax activity, occurs at the local level. Each town has to raise its own property taxes within a very strict framework of the state. And so each town has to deal with the fact that they cannot tax their neighbors. I live in a small town, which is the economic hub and social hub and a few other things of 100,000 people. And we have to pay for the infrastructure for those people when they come in to work and when they come in to play and when they come in with health problems and so on and so forth. So it's pretty similar. It's just on a smaller scale than you're dealing with, except possibly in Manchester, which Lou is from.
The enterprise tax was enacted in 1993. As Susan points out, it was an appeasement because the president of a large corporation, Cabletron, was going to sue New Hampshire because of the business profits tax, which was enacted in 1970. It was part of our total tax restructuring because we had a stock and trade or an inventory tax, and we got rid of the inventory tax and replaced it with the business profits tax. So Benson threatens to sue us, and some creative guys come up with the business enterprise tax, which is a very, very low tax. But it's a tax that's paid on compensation, accrued interest, and dividends, paid at a very, very low level. The original bill was at 0.25%. And it was also used as a deduction against the business profits tax. So you could use it against the business profits tax. And really, the success of this state since that time has been based on the fact that the BPT worked and the business enterprise tax was used to placate Benson and his group so that they wouldn't sue us about the constitutionality of the tax. Susan makes a good point. We have a great deal of difficulty differentiate the revenue from the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax. Now, with our new RIMS system, which is a new system that's been installed over the Department of Revenue Administration, we have a better opportunity to ascertain what's business profits tax and what's business enterprise tax. But as we move along and as we continue to eliminate revenue sources, eliminate taxes in the state of New Hampshire, we are on the path to destruction. What had seemed to work, and Susan's right. What we did is we put together a series of things that nobody liked and made them work, and now we're tinkering around with them, and I think problems ensue. But the enterprise tax, in my opinion, has proved successful since its inception, and it was a push to get it done. Steve Merrill was the governor at the time. The guy who put the tax together, in my opinion, was Bill Odinger. It was his expertise in taxation that pulled the trigger, and they got it done. And we've been existing with it ever since. And it's gone up in terms of the amount. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's gone up, it's gone down. I think it's at 0.5 now, isn't it, Susan? 0.5?
I think isn't it still 0.55?
Yeah, 0.55.
I think they lost that 0.5 initiative.
Yeah, well, I would have loved to. I'd like to see it higher, to be honest with you, and I'd like to see the business profits tax higher because we've got it down to 7.6, and it's going to go down to 7.5. So I think we're asking for trouble. But the enterprise tax saved us. It really did from the lawsuit, and it has worked. Hard to ascertain the key numbers because of what they do is they true it up at the end of the biennium and try to put the profits tax in one corner and the enterprise tax in the other. But it's been very difficult to figure it. When you're figuring revenues, I try to look at those as Susan does. I look at them on a daily basis, and you haven't got the true picture of what the enterprise tax is producing. But it is what it is. I don't think it's going anyplace. It's here to stay.
I'd like to point out, I think Tim Lang has joined us, but is not completely joined.
As well as one of our commissioners, Jim Hudson, is also joined for the record. So in terms of, you've had 30 years under your belt with this, Senator D'Alessandro, you kind of alluded to this. Is the BET is it set? Do people try to tweak it or eliminate it every year, or has it just become part of your fabric? And has it become a partisan issue at all between Democrats and Republicans, or has it just become part of the revenue fabric of the state and nobody thinks twice about it?
Well, it's been a partisan issue from day one, as all taxes are. The Republicans try to lower it all the time. They try to lower the BPT and the BET. Democrats have been trying to hold it strong. When we had a crisis in education, we enhanced the BPT and the BET. We increased both of them in order to take care of our educational problem. Then we created a phony education trust, which supposedly all this money went into. I think it's a problem. It's a partisan situation. It's been a partisan situation, and particularly for the last 6 years. The last 6 years, the debate over taxes has been incredible, as it has been around the country. The ability to reduce and eliminate taxes has been a consistent Republican platform here in the state of New Hampshire, consistent, and we've done it. We've reduced the BPT, tried to reduce the BET, eliminated the interest and dividend tax, eliminated the consumption tax, and really, I think have taken a lot out of our revenue base, and in my opinion, it'll prove problematic in the next budget.
It definitely will be problematic in the next budget. But one of the things to know about the BET is that 80% of it is from the payroll.
Right.
So it's really a payroll tax. The rest of it was added on, I believe, in order to disguise the fact that it was a payroll tax.
Right. They now call it a tripartite tax. Payroll, interest, and dividends is how you pay it. But Susan's right; it's payroll tax.
Speaking just for myself, one of the things that I find attractive about the concept here in the District of Columbia is the fairness argument, which is by some of the idiosyncrasies that I mentioned earlier. A lot of people here dwell here or work here and don't pay taxes. It's either sheltered and there's no profit, or they're commuters who live in a different jurisdiction. So it's a fairness argument here, also a resiliency argument in terms of our tax base as well. Does your BET contribute, in your view, to the overall fairness of a tax system or resiliency, or is it just another tax added on?
Well, I think if you talked to Benson, he thought it was a fairness situation, and he was the driving force behind it. So I think in one way it is, because who do you tax the payroll of? All those who have payroll. So the question of fairness is, I think, is very simple to address in that fashion. But indeed, the real question is, at what level is this tax sustainable to produce the kind of revenue that we need? Because what we've done is we've taken parts of the BPT and part of the BET, and we've pushed that money into what we call the education trust. So without this, you can't fund the education trust. We've got some other ingredients that fall into the trust, but these business taxes are key. They are fundamental to the financial stability of our state.
We would have a great deal of difficulty running this state without them.
Right.
But
we would collapse without these business taxes. They are what's left. They are the base at this point in time. And playing around with these rates is problematic.
Before I turn to my fellow commissioners, I just want to confirm that Senator Lang is here, but he's unable to talk. Is that right? Or be heard at least?
Nope, I'm on, and I can speak if you need me to. I'm just listening at this point. I missed the introduction part, so I'm trying to catch up to what we're talking about.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. So Mayor Williams, do you have anything to pose to our legislators here?
First of all, thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. And so on the one hand, I've kind of heard what you've been saying about the resources available to government to fund operations in this and coming budgets, but how would you situate the activity tax in the government's overall revenue capacity? Is it an inhibitor? Is it neutral? Do you think it tends to help in terms of generating revenue? I mean, in other words, is it neutral and it just depends on what level you set politically, or does it tend to help or hinder in terms of generating revenue for the services government has to provide?
Well, from my vantage point, it's an enhancement. I mean, it's revenue that we weren't collecting, and these two taxes they are the game. They're the game in our state. Now we have a number of other items here, but without these two, we don't function. I mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
We don't function without it. The business profits tax saves this state. We made a transition from the inventory tax, the stock and trade tax, to the business profits tax, and we created a very positive economic situation. That was done in 1970. Now the rate has fluctuated.
Yeah.
I grant that to you, and it's gone up and it's gone down, and recently it's gone down. I think that's problematic. But on the other hand, the BET as a complement to it, I think that's been an enhancement because as Susan points out very clearly and succinctly, it's a payroll tax. Well, it is what it is, and where's most of the money made? It's in payroll, right? I mean, that's where the tax is incurred. Now, many people are exempt from the business enterprise tax, so it was a carefully constructed piece of legislation, so that many segments of the society don't pay it, but the segments of the society that do pay it, I think it's been a lifesaver for us. And the fact
Right.
that you can deduct it against your business profits tax is an even more, that's another plus.
Yeah, it's kind of precedential for us, yeah.
Jim,
Other
Erica,
other
yes.
comments?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Do you have anything to pose to our
Other
friends?
comments on that point? So let me ask you all, do you think it really helps the state in terms of its competitiveness from a business investment point of view? Or is that neutral?
Well, if you listen to the governor, yes, and the lowering of the business profits tax has brought in new business, and we've been pretty good at bringing in new businesses, and we just brought in New Balance. New Balance is going to spend $70 million to build a new factory in New Hampshire, create 250 new jobs. Why did they come here? Well, certainly the tax structure was appreciated, and we got a good, strong American company coming in, and we've had others come in. The others, about 20 companies pay the bulk of all of our business profits tax. Big
Okay.
corporations, out-of-state corporations, and 80% of our business is a small business. So think of that. You get 80% small businesses, 20% paying the bulk of the taxes.
Hey, thank you, I appreciate that.
Sure.
That's true, but we do have an equity measure in this. Our Constitution allows us essentially not to exempt from taxation people and businesses that would otherwise be going out of business or going to ask for public welfare. And it's a very old Constitution. And we have used that in both business taxes and in the interest and dividends tax, which ends next year with a big problem, to exempt up to a certain amount of business activity in the business case. And about 11, 12, 13 years ago, I asked our committee to pass an increase in that floor because it hadn't been increased for many years for inflation. And we actually put it into the law that every 2 years there would have to be an adjustment for CPI. And that was the business enterprise tax. And a few years ago, a colleague looked at me and said, why don't we do this with the business profits tax too? So they both have this provision in them. The interest and dividends tax used to get raised. The floor used to get raised also. But they decided that that was too close to an income tax. And so it disappears next year. That was about 100, well, last year, I think it brought in 140 million, and that's quite a lot for us. But as Lou says, they have been cutting the taxes that are paid by the wealthy almost every single time that they have been in power since 2016. And it's gotten to the point where it's going to be very difficult to balance because now the federal subsidies are going away.
Are you aware of any data or any anecdotal information that the BET has inhibited business activity in the state? Has anybody said, but for that tax, I would have been here in New Hampshire, I would have been bigger? Has it had any adverse consequences that you've heard?
I don't think so. I haven't heard
I,
any.
I don't believe that the people in charge of the businesses, both the very small ones and the very large ones, know what taxes they're paying. There was on a couple of years ago during the pandemic on a televised convention for the Business and Industry Association, which is our Chamber of Commerce. The then head of the Business and Industry Association pulled together three businessmen and asked each of them to say what was their worst problems. None of them mentioned taxes. He'd always been at taxes first. And so he finally was spurred by someone to ask, what about the taxes? And one of the three of them didn't answer, but two of the three of them said that we don't know which taxes we're paying. The accountant brings us taxes and we pay it.
I don't think we have that situation in the District of Columbia. People need to be very aware of the taxes that they're paying, but we'll leave it at.
We have a lot of different taxes. It's
Yeah.
different.
So
Yes, America.
This is Senator
anything
Lang,
for
if I could jump in for a second.
the order.
So again, I think that New Hampshire does have a resiliency in its taxation and that we have multiple forms of taxes that come in smaller versions and larger versions. On the business, I think the key is that, again, New Hampshire on a regular basis has been modeled as overall tax burden to the taxpayer has been very low overall because we don't have any large single source type of taxes. And so business enterprise tax is, again, one of those small taxes that incrementally make the state be able to pay its bills without being burdensome to the taxpayer. And so, I think that the interesting part when you're looking at New Hampshire and taxation and business taxes is that we have a layered approach to taxation that has been saved us in economic downturns. And this business enterprise tax is like one of those layered taxation levels. I've heard part of the conversation earlier about Republicans versus Democrats, and yeah, it's true. I think that taxation is a result of spending. If we keep our spending low, our taxation stays low. Meldon Thompson, one of our great governors, said that, and I agree with that philosophy. So as we're lowering taxes, we're seeing growth in the industry that can still take care of our spending and still allow for reduction in taxation. And so I think it's that give and take that happens. We see growth and we're able to pare back some of the percentages to make it so it stays. We still have a revenue stream that's sustainable and predictable, but we're not impacting the taxpayer as hard as we have to, or could, I guess is a better word.
Well, now you have the other side of the story.
Right.
And there are two sides to every story. Remember that. And I think you can lower taxes, and we've done that, and we do have an array of taxes. But if you keep eliminating taxes, you eliminate the base, you eliminate revenue, and we are on a fast cruise to eliminating very significant revenue sources. We've been doing this, either reducing the amount or totally eliminating the taxes. So again, let me go back to my basic premise, guys. The business taxes saved New Hampshire. Without the business profits tax, which was put in place by Governor Walter Peterson, created by a committee, we would not be where we are today. The stock and trade tax would have destroyed us. The inventory tax would have destroyed us. We're living on the BPT. I'm very concerned about the rate. And I agree with Susan. Maybe the big companies don't know which tax they're paying. I agree. I agree with that. Accountants file the taxes and send them in. But the BPT and the BET are the lifeblood of New Hampshire. Now we're going to eliminate interest and dividends. Interest, that's a $300 billion bogey over the course of a biennium. That's a lot of reduction. A lot of reduction. And I don't know where we're going. I really don't. You know, the federal money's dried up. All this, the COVID money and the American recovery money and the other dollars, they've dried up. Got to allocate them and spend them by next year. That's kind of where we are. And as I said, you know, think back to 1970 when we were really on the verge, and we're here today because of changes that have been made in taxation. And the two the two basic moves were the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax. These were the two fundamental changes that have been made in taxation in New Hampshire. We played around with other stuff. We've done that for years, but these are the keys. And by playing around with these guys, I think we're creating big problems for the future. I wish I wasn't saying that, but I believe it's true.
I just want to add that the biggest secret of New Hampshire taxation is that 67% of the taxes paid in this state are property taxes, paid in fact, all at the local level, but we have a virtual tax that's supposed to belong to the state that the state never has collected. And we're arguing about having some of it collected at this point. But on the towns, we have 228 towns ranging from Manchester, which is about over 100,000 people, to Orange, which has about 600. Each of them has to take care of their own infrastructure and do it with the property tax. And the businesses that work in those towns are also paying the property tax. And according to COST, the Council on State Taxation, the average business in New Hampshire is paying much more in property taxes than it is in our state taxes. And the state keeps on downshifting as we to the towns when we're running out of money.
Well, as Susan mentioned, the statewide property tax, that's used for education. It has a set number that never changes. The aggregate number never changes, but of course the value of the properties change, so you get a different amount on each locality. But all of that revenue is retained at the local level and used for education purposes. Now there's a suit pending that has been deliberated, and they've said that that's not constitutional. That you anything that's in excess has to go to the state, and the state will redistribute that to the needier communities. So that's hanging out there, and the whole education situation is in a state of flux as we speak. So taxes are going to change.
Yesham, what do you want to ask?
This is really interesting. Thank you so much. I'm curious, I just reviewed your tax regime, and, it's so different from the districts. But next year, when you lose the tax on interest and dividends, what do you think will happen? Will you gravitate towards an increase in the activity tax or the profits tax, or expect to see cuts? What is your intuition?
Have you ever seen taxes increase at the state level? Do you know what a problem that is? So the property taxes will go up because obviously the burden falls on the local community to take care of its local needs. But increasing taxes is almost impossible. Everyone thinks they're paying too much. And when you lose, as I said, the interest and dividends, remember now, we have begun a series of reductions in taxes over the last 30 years. And there's not much left to reduce. There's not much left. So the question is always, how do you make up the difference? Well, do you cut the budget? And think about that. Will there be significant budget cuts? And where do those take place? In the area of health and human services. As I say, the business taxes saved us, and yet what's happening now could be a real hurt to us as we move into the future.
A lot of the services of this state are provided by volunteers. Sometimes they get money from the state government for doing it. Sometimes they don't. And that's being strained with the newer generation, which is really overwhelmed by the problems that they have in trying to find a place to live, in commuting long distances because they couldn't find a place to live, in trying to raise a family when childcare is in a crisis. And so it's been for quite some time, it's been hard for them to volunteer. It's been done by the older and older people, and we've got a lot of old people at this point, but a lot of them are disabled old people at this point. So the whole system is in crisis.
I think so. Remember, we are the second oldest state in the United States, but in terms of wealth, we are one of the wealthiest states in the United States. And what do we eliminate? We eliminate the tax that's paid by the wealthiest people. Isn't there a little a sense of craziness there?
Erica?
I'm not asking you to say that we're all crazy. I'm
So
just giving
my
you,
only
Probably
comment,
has another version of this.
right.
well,
We
again,
have a
so,
beautiful
so,
I'll get Tim Lang to chip
You
in on
guys
that
have a
one.
beautiful state though, that's for sure, so.
yeah, so again, I think that we're looking at, when you're looking at taxation as a whole, New Hampshire ranks lowest, one of the lowest and lowest 5 in the nation for overall tax burden to its citizens and taxpayers. So again, as we see reductions, and I don't know of any planned reductions in either the BPT or BET coming up anytime soon, even on our side of the aisle. But again, where the plan is, I think, again, looking at revenues and projections and looking at those things, we see normal activity. Again, the governor's done a great job. Lou called it out. New Balance coming back in and investing big money into our state that'll be a new revenue stream for us. So again, we're going to see the activity that I think businesses are coming to the state. We see the filings increasing, the number of people filing. And I think that, again, the natural growth of businesses coming to our state, whether I wouldn't make the overall statement that it's because of our tax policies, they're running to New Hampshire, but I think quality of life is a big part of it. In addition to our tax positions, that businesses see this advantageous for their workforce and they're coming. And that growth that we're seeing year over year, which has been pretty significant, will continue. I think it's going to slow down. I think it'll more than enough to cover the loss of the I&D tax. We were able to step down the spending this year, but at the same time, we increased education spending by over $160 million, an increase in education spending, even knowing we stepped down the interest and dividends tax because that was a 5-year phase out. And so we saw the step down of that. And we're still able to increase our spending because the growth of businesses in New Hampshire have kept pace. And I think it will continue to keep pace. It'll have a slight slowdown. It's not going to be as fast as it has been in the past in the last 4 to 5 years. We're seeing it now at the rate that business taxes are coming in. There's a slight slowdown. I think Susan hit the nail on the head. I think that it's workforce related. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think it's workforce related. The slowdown is not because we don't have the opportunities, because we don't have the workforce. And able to continue the high rate of growth that we've seen in New Hampshire. So I think New Hampshire's, again, that resiliency and having multiple sources of revenue, at the same time creating a great environment for people to come here and live here. Someone said it's a beautiful state. That quality of life, which a lot more companies are putting investment into, right? They want their workforce to have a good quality of life and emphasizing it more. States like New Hampshire cater to that. So I think we'll continue to see growth going forward because of that. And again, I think that while I wouldn't make the statement that any business makes a hard determination of moving to New Hampshire because of its tax structure, I do think it has a percentage of role in the decision.
And I would just like to correct one thing that Tim said. There was supposed to be a 5-year reduction of the interest and dividends tax. It reduced 1 year, and then they decided to kill it next year.
Eliminated. And don't forget, we've gotten $1 billion in federal money in this state, the COVID money and the American Recovery Act money. Look at how that's been spread around, and we've been the beneficiary of that. As a result of the new federal rules, we received $77 million in interest income in the first year of the biennium, 35 million in interest income in the second year of the biennium, all gained from the interest accrued off those federal dollars. That's good management by the Treasury, but that's not going to be here in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I feel like hearing your story is just really useful, and some of the things we're experiencing sound similar, even as some are different. I mean, Gregory mentioned this at the beginning, that we have sort of this fundamental issue where we cannot tax the income of non-resident workers who are come into the district. That's 55% of all income earned in the district that we can't tax. And then there's the business side of it, where we are unable to tax the net profits or net income of businesses set up as pass-through entities. And so, and providing professional services, which is a lot of groups. When you consider the kind of town we are, there's lots of lobbyists, there's lots of legal firms, there's lots of accounting firms. So I mean, we are looking for a way to build the kind of resilience that Tim, you were talking about. And I'm just curious. I mean, I think the VAT sounds like could be a great option for us, but I'm curious if you've had businesses come and ask for any changes to the tax over the years. I know you've talked about like the rates going up and down and that being kind of partisan political issue. I'm curious about whether businesses have asked for any particular tweaks or changes to the tax over the last 30 years, or if people are kind of generally okay with it and it's just what happens in the policy process that is the sort of pickle.
I don't think so. I think the businesses have been very happy at this point in time. They're seeing their taxes go down, and we'll see. Don't forget, the federal money made a tremendous difference in this biennium. A tremendous difference. We purchased buildings. We gave huge amounts of money to entities that were serving the public. Some needed them desperately, obviously, but that was what a wonderful help that was. You can't fight that, but all of that disappears, and you got to go back to your basic sources of revenue. And one of our basic sources was the interest and dividends, and we've eliminated that. As I said, we eliminated the consumption tax. I mean, it was only $4 million a year, but it was $4 million that we're not using. We don't have anymore, and we reduced the business profits tax. Where are we going? That's, to me, that's the question. We have a lawsuit pending, accepted by the Supreme Court about education. So it'll take about 2 years before that gets adjudicated. What is going to happen there? Tim mentioned more money has been spent for education. Well, yeah, the poor are still poor, and the rich are rich. The poor schools didn't get any better. They just didn't get any better. They're not getting any more money, and the wealthier communities are doing better. I don't want to complain, but I've been here most of my life. I've been in this legislature for a long period of time. I've seen the ups and downs. Partisanship plays a very significant role in the politics of the day.
So, I'm going to chat on that for 1 second. So Lou, I'm going to counter you, and I don't want to get into an argument on the call. But again, I was the author of that education funding formula, and I focused on property port towns to make sure they got significantly more money than before, relative to, if they have the inability to raise taxation. But I don't think these guys want to hear about that. The one thing I did want to say, you were asking about changes to the taxes, and the one place that we've seen a conversation around is especially around large CapEx investments and the ability to, how much of that they're allowed to take against it each year on their business profits, and what that looks like as a percentage. So the one place I will say we've seen some changes is, again, businesses come in when they're making New Hampshire, as Lou said, both the population's old and the infrastructure are old. So we have a lot of old buildings, and companies are coming in and doing, multi-million-dollar renovations to buildings to make them energy efficient. And they were looking for ways of writing off all that interest that they're paying against their business profits as a 100% level, rather than at a percentage of level, a lower percentage of that. So we've seen businesses coming in that we've encouraged, like we want them to invest in our buildings, because if they do, then they're going to stay here, right? If the renovation is so onerous and so expensive, and they don't get a tax break for it, then they're just going to go build a new building somewhere else, possibly. So we want them to renovate. So we've done some modifications to the business profits tax, about allowing some of those CapEx expenditure and interest rates being charged back against to lower their BPT.
Well, maybe perhaps a final question, just without regard to the merits of the impact on the state budget and services. If the BET were to go away tomorrow, what would change in terms of business activity or business behavior?
But we wouldn't have a government.
Yeah.
The state would collapse without the BPT. Collapse.
No, he's talking about the BET.
Oh, the BET. Look at the BET produces a significant amount of money, and I think if it went away again, education, quote unquote educational trust, which gets a lot of
What would be the impact on business behavior? Besides not having a government.
It would be an impact on the smaller businesses, which are mostly New Hampshire based and don't want to move.
Again, so I think the removal of the BET would not have a significant impact, I don't think, other than on obviously revenue and spending, right? Keeping that aside, just talking about, would that create more businesses coming in? Would that chase businesses out? I don't think it'll make any difference whatsoever.
That's where I was going. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mayor Williams or Yesham or Erica, do you have any final questions for our friends from New Hampshire?
Hey, great to talk with you guys. And
Thank you.
maybe it was a cathartic experience for me, but but anyway, I think I've been around here a long time.
We're on a path to submitting our final recommendations to the mayor and the council by the end of the summer, and we will certainly let you know where we end up. And obviously, your experiences from all around are a great inspiration to us. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Great to meet all of you. Have a great American Day. Stay happy, stay healthy.
Thank you. You too. Okay, thank you.
Keep the dream alive and well. That's all.
Okay,
Keep us
bye-bye.
going, will you?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.